welcome back to The Other Perspective with Ananya, Lydia, Serene, and Ellie, 4 students shedding light on the untold stories of global issues and topics.
This week, we look into the role of journalism in current events and its ethical implications. This story started with the Facebook Live.
Let's take it from the top.
A good friend of mine that I grew up with lives in Las Vegas right now, and the other night he was downtown and he was posting on Facebook what more conservative outlets were saying was happening in these protests, and he was on Facebook Live showing the world what was actually happening, and it was 2 completely different things. You know, what was being put out there was these Black Lives Matters protesters were wreaking havoc, and on his live video feed, you can see that it was not them.
In today's world, what we're told isn't always what is true. So today, we have 2 wonderful guests here to help us understand the impact of journalism in shaping our paradigms for better or for worse.
My name is Carrie Faust. I am the yearbook, online, and magazine advisor and reading instructor at Smoky Hill High School in Aurora, Colorado. I have been teaching for 19 years, 16 of them at Smoky. I have a master's in journalism education from Kent State University in Ohio. I am a former board member for the Journalism Education Association, the Colorado Student Media Association, and I am a freedom fighter for student press rights.
My name is Michael Lady. I am the AP IB coordinator at Smoky Hill High School. I'm also a teacher. I taught English for 20 years. I teach, of course, the IB Theory of Knowledge class with lovely human beings, and I still teach that. I am also a freedom fighter in many ways.
So I'm sure you've all seen the posts going around about people doing their own journalism in a way. Why do you guys think there are so many people starting to be so active on social media and taking it into their own hands now?
I think that the American population is waking up out of this miasma that we've been in for so long, where we're sedated by social media, and we're actually starting to understand that our rights are being taken from us, and that we have the power to take them back, and not just take them back, but to make them stronger. However, in the wake, or I should say in the midst of what's happening right now, I am seeing, I think, this resurgence of people understanding the truth, or the necessity of the truth in journalism. And when we see images of reporters being arrested for doing their job at a protest.
Yeah, I feel like I've been seeing a lot of reports of reporters who've been shot with rubber bullets or sprayed with tear gas. And I think this brings up the question of whether or not freedom of the press actually exists in these situations.
You know, to what extent should journalists be censored? And journalists should never be censored because that's against the law. Our media is actually shedding light on the gaslighting that's been going on. The current administration is claiming that they didn't use tear gas in the park across the street from the White House the other day. And the journalists who were there and were tear gassed physically picked up the cans and said, "Oh, really?" And we've never had such immediate fact checking on what our government is doing as we do right now. I mean this week right now, when the White House was doing press conferences every day on the coronavirus, they started running a fact check, right, like split screening it with a fact check, so that everything that was being said, they were immediately fact checking. So between the information that's come out of the coronavirus and the coverage of the killing of George Floyd and the subsequent protests, we're having immediate fact checking in a way we've never had before.
Right.
Yeah. I think that the fact checking is actually one thing that like I've actually enjoyed, because I read the news, but like I'm always questioning like, well, is this like, can I really like trust this? Or just when I see like if I watch like political speeches or whatever that Trump is giving, and I'm like, well, is that like valid? Like, is that true? And I think that getting that instant fact check has actually been really helpful for me to like understand like what sources I can trust and what sources are like something that maybe I should think again before I come back to get my news from there.
Well, the fact-checking side of it is a brand new responsibility of the press that they haven't had in the past. I mean, it's always been their job to report the facts. It hasn't in the past been their job to determine whether or not what our administration was saying was true. I mean, there's always been liars in and out of politics, and it's the press's job to triple check and make sure that they have more than one source agreeing on information. But and there's always been both sides of a story, but I can't remember in my years ever a situation where there was so much distrust in what was being said. And then the gaslighting part of it comes back around, because now people, with this fake news oxymoron, because if it's news, it's not fake. So, I mean, that's like right there. If it's news, if it's fact, it's not fake. Fake news is just meaning they don't like what you're saying. And that has put real doubt into the minds of so many.
Right. Yeah, that whole idea of misinformation versus disinformation. It's so easy for people to get away with putting false information out there, because once you can point to someone who's in whatever opposing group that opposes your ideas, once you can catch them by saying, see, you said X, Y, and Z, and it turns out that wasn't true. If that's misinformation, like you misspoke because you didn't have all the facts, and so you thought what you were saying at the time was true, but it's pointed out to be a lie, and that opens the door for other people to give disinformation against you, which is purposely false, to try to erode your credibility or your authority and things like that. And that's, I don't know how you really combat that, when everyone on earth has a voice.
And it's not the people with the degree and the professional newsroom behind them. The fact of the matter is that every single person right now is a media source, and the most important facts we're getting right now are through crowdsourcing. Do not think for a moment that George Floyd's murderers would be charged right now if it wasn't for the multiple citizenship reporting that came out of that. And thank God to that 17-year-old girl who stood her ground and filmed what was happening. You cannot say that those men didn't do what they did, because those citizens said otherwise. They said, we will not let this man die without a witness. And, I don't know if you guys follow him or not, but a Smoky Hill graduate is a reporter for CBS4. His name is Dylan Thomas here in Denver. And he has Facebook Live from all the protests for the last, 7 days or 8 days as it's been. He is literally hearing what's being reported, and he's combating that immediately in his own experience.
Why would even do that though? Like,
there's an agenda, and they want the disinformation, and let's boil it down. The lies are simply to cast the people in the wrong light who they are in opposition to.
But like most of the people, they don't see these Facebook Lives, they see just what's on TV. So like, I don't know, it's just like so mind-boggling that there's so much happening, but you expect the world to like, I don't know, educate themselves and actually understand, but it's like media has so much power in today's society and people's like thought.
Well, there's two things I want to say about that. Number one, and I am actually also guilty of this. We live in our own echo chambers these days, and we've been able to create them because of the proliferation of social media. I can choose who I follow, which means I can choose who I hear from, which means I can choose to only hear that which I agree with. So we're in this like house of mirrors where we see ourselves and we see ourselves and we see ourselves. And so we're very, very right. And I know I'm right. I must be right. The other thing I want to say about that is I and some of the organizations I work with have been advocating for years that every public high school student should have to take a media literacy class to graduate, because you guys are inundated by media now. Right. And when we can't identify the bias and then sort through the information, when we don't have the tools, and we're not teaching the next generation the tools, and this last generation doesn't have them any either, but you guys were born into this and you still don't have the tools. People talk about you being the tech generation, meaning that you have been taught how to disseminate information and to disaggregate it in a way where you can tell truth from fiction, bias from fact. And I'm not against bias. Like, we all have our bias. We all walk around with the bias of the background knowledge that we grew up with. But if you can't, I can look at a news station that I watch and say, yep, they definitely lean the way I go. And I am aware of that. And I also actively watch news that I don't agree with the perspective of, so that I know what's going on from both sides of the opinion base. But until we are actively teaching people how to identify sourcing and bias and understand how things can be manipulated, then we're not equipping us to ever get better at this.
Yeah, like case in point, that real slick little documentary that came out about
Plandemic.
Plandemic. Like, that thing is slick, and it's easy to watch that and go, oh, holy mackerel, they're right. This is all a conspiracy. If you have the tools to see the propaganda that's behind the whole thing, the loaded language they're using, the fact that there are zero facts that are presented in there, it's all based on essentially, emotion. You can pick through it, but if you don't have those tools, it's sadly understandable why people believe in crap like that.
Yeah, and I think it is kind of dangerous, the fact that, like, a lot of people don't have those tools, because then, like, you're just listening to media that, like, reaffirms your beliefs, right? And you're like, oh, yes, this is true. Yeah. And then, like, when someone else tries to introduce you to a different point, then you're like, no, this is true. And I don't know, I feel like it just reinforces people's, like, hate and, like, their tendency to, like, not listen to reason at some point.
and to be clear and to be fair, it's human nature to go with what's already comfortable to you. We're attracted to things that already mesh with our version of the world and the truth. So it's only natural that it has accelerated in this way, but it doesn't mean it's right. And we're living in a time where the inundation of it is so constant, and we haven't adjusted as a society to learn going forward. I mean, I remember when I was in 7th grade and I was living in Germany, I had to take a class called BASIC. I had to learn basic computer programming because BASIC is what was happening. Right. And so that was a change from learning typing to learning computer programming. We haven't moved forward with this change in our society. We haven't done anything to react to it. We haven't done anything to say, this is a skill our society needs. Let's teach each other not what their opinion should be, but how to know what they're listening to and consuming.
Right. Like, it's not just the people who are reluctant to, like, learning or change. Like, even, like, politicians, like Donald Trump, when he had, like, the fact-checking thing on his Twitter post about the voter vote in ballot, and Twitter put a fact check label, as they should with anything that they have doubts about. Yeah. But, like, even, like, a politician to say, like, no, they can't fact check me. It's scary to see that even, like, the people of the highest rank do not want to change or do not want to learn.
We're in a whole new world with that. And part of this world that we're in is that we're making up the rules as we go along because we don't know what they are and what they should be. So We've got a couple things that factor into that. Number one, the Supreme Court found that anything that the president tweets is part of the historical public record, which is why he can't kick them off his feed anymore because you have to be able to hear what the president says. So that's one interesting point with that. The second interesting point is that Twitter and Facebook are both hesitant to call a lie for multiple reasons. The first and biggest one is for money, because they don't want to piss off any advertisers. But the second, and actually should be the bigger reason, but it's not the bigger motivator, is because they currently enjoy non-publisher status, meaning the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Denver Post, they all are responsible for what gets printed or published on their platform. So if it is a lie, they can be sued. If it is defamatory, they can be sued. Right now, Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, all of them, they are not considered publishers because they say that they don't have any control over the content. Once they start censoring, for lack of a better term, the content, then there's going to be multiple court cases as to whether they are publishers and should therefore have to be subject to the rules of publishers, or if they are a platform, because those are two different things. So while to most of us, we go, why did it take so long for them to put a false information tag on these tweets? It's because they're trying to walk in the space between, and I think that time is coming to an end.
Right.
Do you think that they should, like, if they do add that, I guess, censoring capability, like, should they be?
I personally think they should, because I think they have tremendous power.
Everyone clearly has their own agenda, so of course they're probably going to like lean toward one side or like report in a different way. So as a journalist, is it more important to like cover both sides and give like an not unbiased, I guess, like holistic view, or is it more important for them to like promote an agenda? Because like at the end of the day, they're probably going to want things to like get done, or like for people to believe what they're saying in it one way or the other.
So one of the things that I think is interesting about your generation is that you have grown up with the majority of news personalities are actually what we call pundits. They are paid to take today's headlines, today's facts, and then have an opinion about those facts. And then they are lined up on a platform that meshes with their political bias to begin with. Journalism and pundency are two different things. Whether something did or did not happen is not two sides. That's called a fact. That's not an opinion. It either happened or it didn't. For example, on the riot, it is important that if you're going to have an interview with someone who says, that's terrible, they're horrible people, sorry the dude died, but you can't break out windows, then you also owe it to your readers to find someone who on the other side says, of course they're looting and rioting. This man died and it is time to be heard. That's showing both sides, and that's journalism.
The tension brought by the press and the media is necessary for change. It's only when an old system is challenged that a new and better one can take its place.
And that's the beauty of not only the press system, but the United States as a whole. We the people have the capacity to create the change we want to see.
We'd like to thank our wonderful guests, Michael Adie and Carrie Faust, for taking the time to share their insight on journalism regarding today's current events, specifically the Black Lives Matter movement.
And remember, a change in perspective starts with one story, but this story is far from over. My name is Serene.
I'm Ananya.
This is Ellie.
I'm Lydia, and we challenge you to look at the other perspective.